Well, let's tell people a little bit about Mt. Gox. I covered it as a series. Danny will get him to stick it in the show notes. I covered that back in 2000 and was it in 17? I think 17. 2018. I made a bunch of shows about it so people can understand it, and maybe people should go back and listen. But tell a little bit about the story of Mt. Hold on, did you have coins on Mt. Gox?
So I think I left one Satoshi on Mt. Gox.
Ooh, but you had used it.
Yes.
So did you get lucky?
No, this is also kind of annoying. It's like the writing was on the wall for Gox for months.
Okay.
Taking your coins off exchanges was a thing back in 2013, 14. Like people, we have been saying that since the beginning, that, take control of your keys. I don't remember if not your keys, not your coins was such a meme at the time, but it was definitely a well understood best practice. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, let's go back to 2011 and the Gox hack.
Okay, so back to the beginning then. So, I mean, there have been a couple Gox hacks, and I'm not sure if it's fully known whether they're related or not. But yeah, that 2011 one. So I think Gox had only been like officially open as a Bitcoin exchange for about a year. And yeah, so, kind of momentum was rising. Like Bitcoin was hitting all-time highs in the teens, the 20s. And then that high at 32. And then right around then, somebody hacked Gox, got into the system, and basically got control of, I don't know if it was all coins, but enough that they just market dumped, I don't know how many tens of thousands of Bitcoin, and dropped the price to literally a penny. So like there were real time sites that hooked into Gox's API where you could watch this happen in real time. So it was pretty, it was something watching that happen in real time. And like Gox was, that was where, probably 80+% of trading volume happened back then. So this was, the entire market. Now the hacker, I believe they ended up only being able to get a couple thousand coins off exchange before people at Mt. Gox got their systems in order. But yeah, I mean that was a pretty dramatic event for for a very young industry.
I think the pattern we're going to see as we run through this is the growing resilience of the network and the price and.
Yeah, so actually coming out of Gox, that event, they, given that, it was only a couple thousand coins that were actually stolen, they reversed the trades. So, those prices at a penny didn't stick. So, people didn't get dramatically cheap Bitcoin then. But shortly thereafter, in the following weeks, Bitcoin was trading back in the teens, back to 14, 17. I remember seeing it pretty stable there and being like, oh, wow, there's like a real community behind this. Like, not only is the technology, fascinating, the implications fascinating, but there are enough people who are into this that it's really stabilized, after an event like this. And that was, for me at least, like that was a very like confidence building thing to see it come back after that. And like, I think like kind of everybody goes through that. Like they see some kind of dramatic event happen in the Bitcoin ecosystem, and then it recovers, and then they have conviction after that, right? It's like they've seen it come back from something nasty, and it still survives and like ends up thriving, and yeah, that gives people a lot of confidence.
And community wise and narrative wise, what was it like back then? Did it just feel like it was just a tiny little project that a few people around the world were in, or was there still the vision of what we're seeing today? Did people believe this could be something that could become a global reserve currency?
It was actually both. It was very weird because it was a lot of people who really did see what the potential could be, and we talked about it in Bitcoin Talk forums and everything. And but it was like, but it also seemed like a pipe dream, right? Because it was like so like nobody cared about Bitcoin. Like there weren't VCs talking about it. There weren't politicians talking about it. Like there was it was basically I don't know, something like 30,000 anons on Bitcoin Talk who were talking about it. Now we all like saw the power of what it could be, but there's still that just like huge disconnect between like getting from here to there, and it's happened a lot faster than I assumed. Like to be where we are now, I thought it would take a generation, but
Oh, wow.
It took 10 years, which is amazing to me.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Well, I'm going to come back to that towards the end. Okay, so this is an interesting one. You talked about when Pirate at 40 blew up. I don't even know what that is. Me and Danny were like, what is that? I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, so that was probably, if not the first, then the first substantial Ponzi scheme on top of Bitcoin. So that was a guy who was running something called Bitcoin Savings and Trust. So that was in 2012. So there were a bunch of Bitcoin businesses that popped up in 2011, 2012. It was actually a fascinating time. Like a lot of the things that exist now as full-fledged venture-backed businesses existed back then in different form. Like people spun them up very quickly. So anyway, in that environment, this thing called Bitcoin Savings and Trust comes up, and this guy went by the screen name Pirate at 40. No one knew his real name then. Promised 7% a week, and took people's Bitcoin and then paid them out 7% more in Bitcoin a week later. And so this went on for some amount of time, weeks or months, and before it got substantial and enough to move the market. There were, of course, many rational people being like, this is ridiculous. There's no way this is real. It's got to be a Ponzi. What are you idiots doing putting your money into this? But he had reasons. There was this belief that maybe he was buying coins from or that he was mining, and maybe there's demand for virgin mined coins in excess of the market price, and so somehow he's able to arb that and and get the 7% that way. Like that was one theory, but so people want to believe this stuff, right? They see these numbers, they want to believe it's real, and they're reading posts from people who are saying they've been doing it for months and getting the payouts and everything, and obviously it's going to blow up at some point, and it did, and I believe in September 2012, maybe August, if I'm not mistaken, and it tanked price like 50% in a couple weeks, because I forget exactly what the market mechanics there were, but it was enough to drive the ecosystem at the time.
And was he a scammer who disappeared with a pile of coins?
No. So he went bust somehow. He eventually got arrested, and there was a trial, and he got convicted and did some time. His name is Trendon Shavers, if I recall correctly, and he did a podcast on Bitcoin Uncensored, I think, with DeRose and Junseth, like in 2016, I think, which was really interesting. Like one thing that who knows whether this guy is believable or not, but like one of the things he said on the podcast was that like the thing that blew up his scheme, which he claims was not supposed to be a Ponzi to begin with, but who knows? One of the things that blew it up supposedly was when Karpelès failed to deliver. So Mark Karpelès, the founder of Mt Gox, failed to deliver, some. I think it was a couple 100,000 Bitcoin to him that he had deposited on Gox, supposedly, something like that.
Gox lost 800,000-ish Bitcoin, so he's claiming a quarter of them were his.
I don't know if he claim. I don't know what the claims are, but there was. I remember like listening to that interview and being like, "Oh wow!" So this guy is potentially actually the first victim of Mt. Gox, if what he's saying is true. And then like later on, it's conceivable in one way because like later on, I think it was BitMEX Research put out an in-depth piece on like what really happened at Gox and like what the source of the loss of funds was, and it did date back to a hack that occurred in I believe fall of 2011. So it is possible that Gox was insolvent that early.
Yeah. And, I interviewed Jed and got part of the way in. And as I remember it, Danny, correct me if I'm wrong, but as I remember it, when Jed sold it to Mark Palace,
the 80K, yeah.
Yeah, the 80,000 were missing, and they had
and they knew about that.
They knew about that. And they had a plan to recover it, but I can't remember how. So I could see something
probably
like that.
Probably just fees and buying the Bitcoin from trading fees.
I always felt like Jed offloaded a problem.
Yeah, maybe.
Someone else.
I mean, there was
yeah. So let's let's actually talk about the real Mt. Gox hack, because that, to a lot of people around that time, that was devastating. And it still is for some people, but that felt like one of those incidents that could have been the end of Bitcoin. Felt like it.
So it did to a lot of people, and it did to people who had gotten into Bitcoin, I think, after like the 2011 bear market. So people who like kind of came in 2013 with that bull market cycle. Like Bitcoin did 100x in 2013, right? So like that's a monster bull market. So it drew in a ton of people, and that was the first bull market where we, kind of got greater visibility. A ton of like more prominent people, talking about Bitcoin all the time. Anyway, so Mt. Gox, and then Mt. Gox went under in February 2014 is when they declared bankruptcy as a result of a hack that had probably occurred several years prior. So they'd kind of been running fractional for who knows how long, and I don't know how long management there even knew they were running fractional, but they were. But the writing was on the wall for a while. There was like dramatically different pricing on Mt. Gox versus other exchanges, and that price gap kept getting wider. And you could get your coins off Gox for a while that price gap was significant. So like that, that was the big red flag. And then when Mt. Gox went under, it was just like a deluge in the media of people associating Mt. Gox with Bitcoin, the protocol itself, and the ecosystem as a whole. And Gox was 80% of volume at the time still. So it was the key player in the industry and the market. Didn't help that there's this thing called transaction malleability, which is some might call it a bug in Bitcoin's kind of early pre-SegWit design, where basically transactions could be fudged in a way. It's not like a double spend or anything like that. But anyway, it's a relatively minor detail, but Gox lost a few hundred Bitcoin as a result of kind of people spoofing them in that way. And Carpelli's like initially came out when Gox went bankrupt and tried to blame the entire thing on that, which was a Bitcoin protocol issue, and then the media ran with that, and like so there's this like association between like, oh my gosh, Bitcoin has this like core flaw, and it cost this like huge 850,000 Bitcoin implosion, which is not the case at all. That Gox was an important business, but just one business built on top of Bitcoin. And I think like on the day they went bankrupt, I think I tweeted exactly that Gox was one node. People who think it was anything more are suffering from centralized thinking. But this is fundamentally a decentralized ecosystem, and we'll continue to grow it from there. But it did precipitate a nasty bear market, and a lot of people left.
Well, I was very new to Bitcoin in 2013, but I wasn't a Bitcoiner. I was an acquirer of Bitcoin on local Bitcoins because I was a Silk Road user. So I wanted to buy something, maybe a Bible, and so I'd go on to local Bitcoins, which was always a really interesting experience, because there was still a weird amount of trust, because you would go on and you would select your buy. And the person would ask for a photo of you holding like a piece of paper. You'd get their bank details, but you'd have to pick somebody with a bunch of transactions before.
Oh, this is when, okay, so you're not doing this face to face.
No, this was, what do you call it when you put something into
escrow?
An escrow. It was like an escrow, and there was like a bit of trust involved.
Yeah,
and
sure.
And I remember my ex thinking, what the hell are you doing? I was like, well, I have to prove who I am. They want a photo of me holding a piece of paper. I can't remember what I had to have on the piece of paper. Maybe it was like...
Probably the date.
Yeah, or no, I think it might have been something to do with like the bank account it was coming from.
Okay. And
And then you would send them the money, but you were talking like... the first time I did it I remember it was £80 for a Bitcoin. So that might have been 2012-ish. I can't really remember, but...
That would be 2013.
2013. Yeah. Right at the start, it would have been.
Yeah, in the spring.
Yeah. And so I would be doing that, and then I'd get my Bitcoin, and then I would transfer it to Silk Road, make my purchase, and done. And that's all I did. I did some CDF trading of Bitcoin just because it was so crazy, and I would make and lose lots of money. But I didn't study Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I didn't read about Bitcoin. I didn't know about libertarians or Austrian economics. I didn't care. And then the price crashed from 1,200 down to whatever, and I was like, I'm done, and I forgot about it.
Yeah.
I was just done. And so like I heard about Mt. Gox, but I wasn't a Bitcoiner, so it was just like, oh, that's just some thing.
Yeah.
Didn't pay any attention to it. But if you're an actual Bitcoiner, you've been around for years, what was that day like when you heard about it?
Well, again, the writing was on the wall, so I wouldn't say I was terribly surprised. It was just like, okay.
Were there rumors?
Yeah. And again, it's kind of like Luna, right? Like it happened in dramatic fashion, kind of, not surprised that it happened, just surprising that it happened. So like in such a binary way, right? Like they didn't, Mt. Gox didn't just like, slowly bleed out and, lose some money and blah, blah, blah. Like they lost most of the money, like overnight, it felt like.
I think it was about 150,000 Bitcoin they eventually recovered.
I think 200,000.
Was it 200,000?
And then a bunch of that went to lawyer fees and stuff. Yeah. So I think people are getting back about 15% of what they had in Gox, and I think they're getting it back like potentially this year, maybe or next year. But which is interesting, right? Because okay, so if you had Bitcoin in Mt. Gox in like late 2013, early 2014. Are you, and you're getting 15% of it back now, 9 years later? Like, are you better off having been a forced hodler with basically a lockup with an 85% fee? Like, are you better off than if you had control of those keys?